You're welcome to take the stage, ma'am.
Do you want me to stand or can I sit?
You can
It's
do
up to
whatever
you.
works for
Whatever
you.
works
Okay.
best.
I also brought my father back here, who is a person that I lean on a lot to answer any questions too. His name's Tom Reed.
So the rest of us do that too.
Whoops.
The rest of us do that too. When in doubt, call Tom.
But what I was asked to talk about is kind of the top 3 trends that we're seeing currently. And the first one I would say that we're seeing is rural properties are becoming more popular. There's an increased demand for rural right now, and that's basically because of COVID. People are working from home, and the need to commute to work is not a necessity anymore, and rural properties make it easier to kind of spread out, and people are wanting that room. And they've also become a little bit more affordable. The second thing that we're seeing, as housing becomes more expensive in the city centers, we're seeing like developers and owners wanting to rezone to higher densities, which you guys are probably seeing that too. One example of this, a property that I'm familiar with in downtown Bentonville on Southeast C Street. It's a small site. It's a 0.05 of an acre, and it sold and was built in September of 2020 for about $515,000. It's 0.05 of an acre. It's a multifamily property, new construction. 6 months later, today, and at that time that it sold, it was worth about $220 a square foot. Now it's worth well over $300 a square foot. So that's what owners and developers are. They're trying to get their development costs down so they can make it more affordable, if that's possible. That's just an example of what they're trying to do. Another thing, and this really isn't a trend, but according to the Skyline report published by the San Walton College of Business at the U of A, during the second half of 2020, roughly 2,200 new houses and 420 active subdivisions in Washington and Benton counties became occupied. That's up over 50% from the second half of 2019. And the demand for appraisals right now is more than we have ever seen. The available supply of housing goes down every day, and the supply of skilled workers to construct houses is also smaller, and that's basically due to the recession that we have. A lot of those people got out of the business or they moved away. So we even have a smaller group of skilled workers to work from. I spoke with someone in Fayetteville who owns 9 single-family homes in the Sloanbrook subdivision, which is in West Fayetteville, which is I would say a medium price point affordable subdivision. They have received no less than 5 letters each week from realtors stating they have someone interested in their homes, and there's no houses for sale. And the people are just wanting to live in certain neighborhoods, and so the realtors are actually knocking on doors, sending letters, because there's just no supply. Also, due to COVID, the supply of materials is backlogged. Demand has caused prices to increase, and many believe that that's when COVID eases, that it's not going to go away. Those prices are still going to stay high. I was also asked about infrastructural issues we're seeing with the current growth trends, because we're doing obviously a lot of appraisals, especially with all the infrastructure going on in the cities. And growth is going to occur where roads are constructed, along with sewer. Sewer is going to need to follow. And I mean, we realize that can be very taxing on a city because it's very expensive to build roads. For example, the construction of Dixieland is going to open and allow large tracts of lands to be developed. Without Dixieland, that development would have been a lot slower to happen. And in Rogers, the Oak Street overpass, which is going to go over 49, will connect two dead-end streets, allowing large tracts of land to be developed. But that's basically what we're seeing with infrastructure. We're also seeing a mixture of development follows new infrastructure. I think neighborhood centers are crucial. Neighborhood centers allow short trips to convenience goods stores, and it keeps traffic and congestion off the roads. So if we could do, small neighborhood centers in different areas so people don't have to travel as far to get their goods, their shopping goods, their essential needs, can alleviate the necessity to travel a great distance for those items. Other things that are still kind of unknown for us is commercial properties. Positive absorption is still occurring. However, companies could realize as they go back to work, they don't need offices. Or the opposite could happen. They could realize they actually need more space, more office for their employment. We really just don't know how that's going to play out yet. But as long as we have continued population growth and job growth, which everything I've read says 28 to 30 net people per day in Northwest Arkansas, the housing market is going to be exploding. So that's what we're saying. And if anyone has any questions, try to answer them the best I can. And he's also going to help.
So are we seeing any of the same kind of trends in downtown Springdale like you're seeing in downtown Bentonville where the cost is going up quite drastically?
Yes, we're obviously, Springdale's a little bit behind. But yes, that's occurring. Not to the degree that it's occurring in Bentonville, but it is occurring. And one thing I will say is that looking at the multifamily markets, Springdale has the lowest vacancy of multifamily of all the cities, like 2% vacancy. That tells me we need more multifamily properties.
We're getting several.
Yeah.
We're getting several coming in. I think the development community understands that too, because we're seeing more discussion about multifamily projects all the time.
Bentonville actually had the highest vacancy for multifamily, which was kind of surprising. But
Do you think that's the nature of the multifamily? Is it more?
It could be the type of multifamily. I mean,
cost a
higher,
square foot? Yeah. Okay.
What percentage were they if we're at 2%?
They were up around 9-10%. We're at 2%.
The big thing that's been impacting Bentonville is that there's been a lot of workforce that came in to support the Walmart business. And with that, with the COVID piece, that disbanded.
Is there a feeling that it's going to come back as Walmart goes back to the office?
I can't speak on behalf of Walmart other than the fact that they haven't slowed down their development of their new headquarters or shrunk it in any way. I can tell you as far as my office, this is the first week I've been back in the office, and it's probably 70% to what it was. And based on the traffic patterns, there's a lot of people that are back in their offices. I think you're going to have a certain percentage that's still going to just work from home, but a lot of people have been eager to get back into the office.
Working at home with everybody thought was going on. Can't separate office and home life when you're there all the time.
My wife is happy that I'm not at the house.
There's some areas in this country that are commercially are really suffering. I mean, we've experienced some of it, but not nearly to the degree that other areas have. And retail was already in trouble when COVID hit to some extent, and that's may continue. But I mean, who knows when this is all said and done? Are people going to come back to the office just like they were before? Or, there's, just like Shannon said, there's two schools of thought out there. They may not come back because, they're used to working at home. They feel like they can get the same thing done at home. The flip side of that is they want to come back, more space between, which means it's going to be higher demand for larger office space. So you know, it's too early to tell, but, you know, I certainly think we should feel fortunate that we haven't been hit any harder than we have.
So we've got a few guys on the line right now. I see Peyton and Ben, and I think I saw Kevin Flores for a moment. Do any of you guys have anything to chime in with as we talk about this?
Nothing really to say. I don't think anything that she said surprised me. It's kind of what I'm seeing when I look around.
I'm curious to know about and I don't know if you know this kind of information, Shannon, but I'm curious about a lot of the purchase activity, whether that is those people moving into this area or whether that's, you know, we have a whole population that already lives here, right? That's trying to either buy their first home or buy a bigger home, or do we know how that breaks down at all?
Well, I think it's a net. That 28 to 30 people is a net. It takes into consideration births, deaths, people moving in.
Gotcha.
It's
Just a
a net
population
number,
increase
yes.
of roughly 30 per day.
Right.
Do we have any speculation about the medical facilities that's going in in the Southwest Overlay? What impact that's going to have on that region? The UAMS has announced they're going to put something over there. We don't have a location yet. Children's Hospital is there, Highlands is there, all those kind of things. Do we see trends in? But a lot of that property's owned by some families that don't sell it either.
Right.
So that kind of, and I know you and I have talked about some of that property south of Mount Tyson Parkway. Are we seeing more activity on those pieces of property, do you think?
Not really right now. No, I haven't seen anything.
Okay, but there's not a lot of infrastructure down there either.
Mm-mm.
The Highway 112 discussion about widening that, are you seeing any people talking about that? Are y'all doing any of those appraisals?
No, we haven't been asked to do any of that yet. We did do a little bit, you know, for the northern bypass, but nothing for 112 yet.
Okay. Highway Department's not far enough along to let people.
I don't think so.
No.
Or else they're doing their own appraisals. So.
You never know how.
Mhm.
Yeah. Somebody needs a good crystal ball is what we really need.
It's a blurry
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah, that's what we need is a good crystal ball. If you had one, man, you could do okay.
One of the things I wanted to ask about, something that comes up very often when we're talking about multifamily developments in particular as they pertain to existing single-family subdivisions, you always hear, this is going to affect my comp. And I know Peyton has brought this up several times in the past, and I wanted to see if you might have something to add to that.
So when you have property owners come in and say, this is going to affect the value of my home.
Right.
We don't have any proof of that.
Right.
Nothing.
Okay. So there's no legitimacy to that.
No.
To that
When you
argument.
go to appraise a single-family home, Shannon, what kind of comparables do you look at?
Single family homes.
Do you look at to see if it's next door to a multifamily? Does that make any difference?
It doesn't.
Okay.
Okay, well, that quickly answers my question.
That's
All right.
really what people are
So-
saying. Oh, if it goes next door to me, it's gonna be terrible.
Yeah.
I know what Peyton's next question is going to be in one of the planning commission meetings to you.
Obviously, if that single family home is actually on a multifamily zone site, you know, it changes things a little
Sure.
bit, which that happens too.
Take off my planning commission hat and put on my.
You know, over the years, we've been asked to do studies on that very same thing, you know, single-family homes next to multifamily. Regardless what you think, and in your mind, everybody thinks that's an automatic loss in value, you can't prove it from the marketplace. You look at sales and resales, and then compare that to other areas where where they're not next to multifamily, and you can't. And regardless what you think before you go in, the market doesn't show that to be the case.
So then what are the factors that would affect property values? If you're letting heavy commercial go in without a buffer, does that, you know, what would be the things that would be legitimate that would affect the value of a home, an existing home?
You talking about like property encroachments, like?
Yeah, like if you got a single family subdivision that's been there 20 years and we're putting a commercial next to it, does that devalue those homes too?
It could, you know, I mean, I've gotten to the point, I don't say for sure on anything
Yeah.
like that, because it just depends on the situation, the type, anything that might be a detrimental use that, you know, that could potentially have some influence on property value. But again, the only way you can prove that is go to the marketplace and look at the sales and resales of those properties. And, you know, you would think if people are just continually saying, hey, that's going to devalue my property, then the market would reflect that. With multifamily and single family, that's hard to prove.
It's the fear of the unknown is what it is.
Commercial property might be a little
Yeah.
easier to support, but you know.
Or an industrial property. maybe.
Yeah, industrial property for sure, but with all the high density now, where you got the work-live attitude, where you work downstairs, live upstairs, and urbanism, new urbanism, style designs, then you got commercial right along with residential. You know, that's part of the attraction.
And that's a desired trait, right? That,
Yeah.
I mean, people want to live in this kind of close community.
I mean, that's what you're seeing now. And, I mean, you look at Fayetteville and all their new zoning, and I get them mixed up all the time, but NC or CS, I mean, those are the two really, and most of those are little bitty lots with very little setbacks. And I think one of them didn't have any setback at all, where, you know, the idea is to have commercial downstairs, residential upstairs. So it's
Which our
just-
form-based code allows it to happen downtown in a controlled environment, because we have just certain places where that can go on.
And I've sort of seen an appreciation in the land values when we did Park Street. I can see that. I could see that happening
Yeah.
on Park Street, and you know, it's going to happen even more as time goes on.
Well, and your comment about neighborhood centers scattered out more, that's the idea of the mom and pop shops that used to be there, so you didn't have to go so far. So are we going back to a trend that kind of helps do that with some kind of mixed development that we don't have anyplace else except downtown? And so, you know, we've been talking about, we may need a mixed use zone that we can put in other places.
Right.
That allows us to do some of that, so they don't have to drive clear across town to get milk and bread on the way home, you know, that kind of stuff. So that, you see that as a trend that maybe
Yes.
something we need
I
to
think
look
that's
at.
important.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, I would just from just the economic standpoint, you would think that diversity of housing in a more, not in a dispersed way, but in a more planned way, would boost housing values, because it keeps things in equilibrium based off the population density and the economic factors in which you can buy it. We just planned a whole bunch of single family housing all over. We might oversupply the market relative to what's available to be purchased. So I mean, I would think the economics would support
Which
it.
goes back to that idea, not everybody wants a lot with a big house on it, they have to take care of the rest of the lot. That's not what we're seeing the trend going to. So when we hear everybody say, oh, we need bigger lots, bigger houses in Springdale, I think if we really needed those, we would see the developers step up and do that. That's not what they're saying now.
You gotta have choices.
Yeah, but we have 3 new subdivisions coming in the next 2 meetings. It's all single family lots on bigger houses, bigger lots, 80-foot lots, 70-foot lots.
Somewhere in there.
Yeah.
I
What's
think-
a couple of hundred?
300.
300?
I think around 300.
On the northwest part of town.
Total, yeah.
We're seeing that. That's what the developers are putting in there, so that's not giving that flexibility that we were just talking about.
But that's an area that's still open in there right now.
Yeah.
And that's just the economic development is calling it.
Yeah.
Good luck finding a house between the 3 and 500,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, like,
Yeah. Y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Hey, so I got a side question for Shannon here about the housing market. I've been actively looking for a house 5 months now, maybe a little longer, and didn't play it smart, and I just waited too long. Now it's, you know, every house is like a grocery store now. There's just long lines to go look at everyone that's listed. And I think next week is typically the first week of April is the highest amount of new listings every year. Do you foresee this plateauing anytime soon, like within the next 3 months, or what are y'all seeing?
What we're seeing is it's going to continue with the job growth, population growth. It's just going to continue. Now, as far as the greatest number of listings in April, I'm not sure about that. I do know that our inventory is dwindling every day. So if you're going to get in, you need to get in now because the prices are just going to go up.
Right. Yeah.
I was gonna just mention something, two things real quick too. I think that it's really important that we focus on, like Mr. Reed said, and Patsy said this before, choice, right? Because we're not trying to tell people what's popular or we're not trying to get everybody to live downtown, right? What we've done historically is build only one type of thing or two types of things. It's a house on a lot or it's an apartment building. And that's really the only two options we've ever given people because that's all we've built. So I think really honing in on that, what we want to do is provide choices for people and lots of different choices so that you can find a place that fits your lifestyle and what, that type of thing. So I think that's something that we probably need to remember. Another thing too that I was going to mention that I thought of, in downtown we have no, if a building is of a certain size, they do not have a minimum parking requirement. And I do think that's something, parking requirements are something that we need to look at and address because we don't get a lot of tax revenue off of parking lot square footage, right? So what we would, I think something we should look at is whether the parking requirements that we have in place are reasonable. A lot of times, if you look at parking requirements in the city code, they're just kind of arbitrary. It's however many spaces for however many dentist chairs you have, right? Whatever. So I think that could be some place if we're talking about just the dirt, the cost of dirt going up so much, I think we need to think about how can we most efficiently capitalize on some of that. And maybe our parking requirements, if you do an aerial view of the city and look at all of the empty parking lots, is there not a smarter way that we could do some of that? So I want to put that out there for folks. It's something that I have experience with, and I think that it's a little bit hard to do. I think it just takes some more nuance when we look at these things, and it's hard to say that I'll give you auto-related business, auto service businesses. There's a gigantic difference between a boutique kind of high-end auto detailer or somebody who maybe it's a one body guy who works on, one car at a time versus Big O tires. But yet, if you look at the code and the requirements, they would have the same parking requirements. So I think that's something that we need to look at too.
I think I just add on a little bit to that, Arthur. I think that's definitely, diversity of housing, I think is something that we just continue to strive for. And I think, providing choice, like we said, for not only developers, but for the constituents, but also I think what we can do in terms of whether it's multifamily or single home, whatever it is make sure we have good standards, so that whatever housing that is built, that is good, equitable, quality housing, so everybody has, not only a fair shake, but that will obviously help continue to spur economic development in the area.
The challenge with that is state law, because we can do it for multifamily, we can't do it for single. So we've got to come up with some innovative ways, and the C districts that we just got in place helps us address that without, it's gotta be optional, and so we're really struggling with that. If you need to talk to your legislator, if there's something that needs to be changed at the state level, in my opinion, that's one of those things that's causing us a problem. And they have some very strong lobbies, so it's a tough one to deal with, yeah.
I think another piece that we should look at is around our parks. If you take the Tyson ballpark and everything compared to the Shaw Park that's doing a soft opening this weekend, I'd be curious as far as when you look at some of the infrastructure around that and the types of developments, are we seeing some dynamics and trends associated with the types of parks? And I call that out because our city has done a really good job of focusing and will later this year start construction of a signature one downtown. But each one of them provides a different dynamic altogether in that whole piece. I think about Tyson Park. One of the did a great job of doing upgrades there. Although I don't agree with all of them, but there's no places to eat.
Right.
And it actually can put a bad image of the city that you've spent all of this. What do we need to do to attract, and how does that fit around the parameters of some of that area? Because there's still a lot of vacant land in that whole piece versus Jeans George Park, which is probably going to be the most diverse type of park that we have. I don't know. It'll be something else to be interesting to look at as well, and how from a appraisal process, what you guys see as far as dynamics around that. I don't know.
I mean, that's why I think it's crucial to have those commercial centers, neighborhood centers in those areas. Where those should be, I'm not exactly sure, but
Bentonville's doing a really good job with theirs around the airport and that whole process there. There's a good balance of things.
Shannon, what would you classify, what would you call a shopping center, a neighborhood shopping center? Square footage, like how big square footage or
I would say it would be small.
How many units?
Maybe a convenience store, small, maybe quick service, restaurants,
Dry cleaning, stuff like that?
dry cleaning, maybe laundromat, those kind of things. That's what I would call kind of in that area, just neighborhood, and maybe neighborhood offices, things that would serve the community or that area.
And
Maybe
this
it's-
would tie back into our use units, right? So we want to look at our use units if we're gonna, that would go along with the zoning.
Storage, self-storage units is something we seem to be getting
Everywhere.
everywhere. I keep telling people when they come in, have you checked the market to see if there really is a need? And it's like, they're all full, you can't find any place to store things.
Which is crazy.
It just blows my mind.
You've had the last year to shop Amazon and accumulate it.
Yeah, that's true.
Storing all that toilet paper.
Yeah.
It is amazing. We've got another one coming in that we just met with last week that's,
It's in all the cities too, I mean, Rogers.
I know.
It's bananas. There's so-
yeah, it's true, so, yeah.
But in the interest of keeping the ball rolling and getting everybody out of here around
Sorry.
6:30 or so, we're going to give the floor to Brandon Rush from ESI. He's going to go over some things with us, and yeah, it's all yours, man. Tell me when to flip through slides.
Okay, thank you, Rick. Thank you, everyone, for the chance to be here and talk about this. We really appreciate the chance to add our voice to the chorus, I guess. I would say that I don't disagree with anything Shannon said. We are definitely seeing the same things, maybe just coming at it from a different angle. So a lot of what I'm going to say might kind of echo what she said. So I was asked to talk about development trends that we're seeing, and then also infrastructure in Springdale. I wanted to take the trends first from demand side and then from a supply side, and then kind of talk about where they meet, and then infrastructure, just kind of go through all the things that we deal with as civil engineers every day, and I guess offer our thoughts on what we see. So good to move on. So nationwide, there's a huge push for more housing, and the supply is basically not keeping up, and that's causing prices to go up. COVID definitely didn't help, and now a lot of people realized where they live, they want something else. So it kind of ratcheted up a lot of demand that was underlying already. Go ahead. So one group that kind of surfaced is millennial buyers, home buyers. For a long time, this group was thought of as wanting to permanently rent so that they can move from Dallas to Chicago and take all these different jobs and never really put down roots. That trend is over. Now those people are wanting to buy houses, and that you can see is a big, past couple of years has been something that wasn't as anticipated. At the same time, the past year, what we saw is the people that made purchases in the past year generally had outstanding credit scores, or at least very good credit scores. So there's probably underlying demand for people that lost that job and were unable to move, but they still want to move, and in the next year or two, once they've recovered their finances and got the credit score back up and saved up some money, we may just be looking at the tip of the iceberg in terms of who wants to buy and sell a house today versus who can actually afford to make that purchase. At the same time, the existing supply doesn't necessarily match what people are wanting to buy. We all kind of talked about that already. Just offering choice where there's more potential buyers for every unit, and each buyer can look at a lot of different options instead of just there's one area of town and everyone that's 35 lives over there, and everyone that makes a certain income lives over here. The more choice, the better, because people are really starting to branch out, I guess, from the single family yard, as everyone else was saying. Millennials in particular, though, want the aspects of urban living that they like and are willing to trade off some of the key tenets of suburban living, like having a big yard, in exchange for being able to walk somewhere, walk to a restaurant, go on a trail, know their neighbors, things like that, rather than spreading out and everyone has an acre lot. So that trade-off is a lot more willing to be made now than it has historically. So what I remember developers being worried they could sell, can we sell this density? They don't worry about that anymore. People want that. Another trend is Americans aging alone, and that's kind of another case of where what the available supply is may not meet what the demand is looking for. There's some of this is getting addressed here, but not nearly enough, and it's a trend that is probably going to continue. Another trend is multi-generational housing, which is basically the opposite. So you have grandma and grandpa and parents and kids all living under one roof, which leads to a different layout that you'll want, where the kitchen is versus the bedrooms and all this stuff. So another case of asymmetric supply, not necessarily perfectly meeting the demand, and people that want this can't find what they want, and then they end up buying something that doesn't let them do this, and then you have 3 households in 3 different houses instead of one that is a multi-generational house. So there's another need that's tough to meet. At the same time, there's a new group that's really growing rapidly of people buying single-family houses and renting them, or building their own single-family subdivisions and only renting them and not selling the houses. So basically, there's just another competitor for people wanting to buy single-family houses in these, this new group that is basically searching for income, you know, somewhat novel way that hadn't been as prominent before the last housing.
Can you go back?
Yes.
Might have been one or two slides, I'm not sure. Yeah. Yeah.
This one?
Yeah. Help me understand again what you're seeing as far as the age components here.
So basically, people are living longer, and instead of like moving to a home or whatever, they want to live on their own in their house, but they want to downsize to a smaller house, and then they're on a fixed income or whatever. And basically, if you have student apartments, you know, you have that type of unit, but there's not really something that is friendly to the older folks that may have trouble getting around, and you know, the things that they want to be around is different than the craft bar scene.
Yeah.
He's talking about me.
No, it is interesting the range and the ages there of ones that are living alone, that are in their, in their more senior years on it.
But don't you tie some of that just to the fact that their spouse may have passed? I mean, the older you get, the higher likelihood you may have a spouse pass, which is going to leave a lot higher proportion of single.
Well, what's interesting, I've had to research this a lot just because my mom
Right.
situation on there. She was living in over a 4,600 square foot house. My dad passed away. She's now not in a condition to live there in that whole piece. So, but what was interesting in doing research of different locations, there's a big growth of people that they don't want to take care of anything. They still want independent living. So you're seeing these assisted living facilities built, but then around those they're doing independent living. So they're actually bringing in that 55 plus group, already getting them into kind of the network, call it,
Right,
in that whole piece. And the facility we moved my mom into, they have 7. All of them were shut down. They couldn't take any more people in. And so that's the effect of COVID, as well as now all of a sudden you have a lot of these facilities that can rent out things. So it's interesting, the trickle-down effect. Those people are moving out of their homes. They have all this stuff they're putting in the storage buildings because the family doesn't want it. And then they're moving into these facilities. I'll be interested to see how many more of these independent living with the assisted livings types of developments we start to see coming into fruition as well to meet those demands. Because I agree that I think there's a lot of them that still want a home, but they may not want to own it.
Yes, I think so. I think that kind of maybe this group, you know, is your boomer group that has historically been divorced at higher rates than generations before them, and then they are more likely to live alone, and you know, so it's kind of just a category that hasn't historically been as big as what it looks like is going to be. And we have people ask us about 55 plus housing all the time. And there's all sorts of programs to incentivize it. And, I mean, if you build it, it's full.
Sure.
Immediately. So,
You know,
It's like
about-
Tom Inbox.
Yeah.
He does one in every city, and
Yeah.
I mean, there's a waiting list.
I was thinking in Ralph Pendergraft has that one over on 56th Street where you own a home, but you don't take care of the yard or anything.
Yeah.
And they have a waiting list. If the house goes on the market, you better be the first one there because it won't last the day.
Especially when one of them got it.
Plum City.
Yeah, it's actual single-family homes. I don't know of any other one that you can actually buy a house in there, and you buy the house itself,
Right.
and everything else is taken care of for you. And Ralph was ahead of his time when he put that in, because it struggled to get started. It really did, but now it's a hot item.
Well, as we think of the northwest corridor of the city and you have that gateway going to the airport, a lot of these people are gonna wanna travel
Yeah.
in that whole piece. And I'd be interested to see how some of that actually shapes some of the area as well. So, sorry to go back. That was a very interesting chart.
It's, if anyone has any questions, just stop. I'm good with talking as we go, no problem. Well, those are kind of the demand trends that I had wanted to point out. Supply side, average tenure, housing tenure has gone way up after '08. People are staying in their same house longer. So before, this is the Great Recession, before then, average tenure was 4 years, and now it's 8 years. And I don't know what the number is in Northwest Arkansas, but I'm sure it's higher than 8 years. It seems like people generally stay in their house, and a lot of the activity is people moving in compared to people moving around within Northwest Arkansas. So it's just one of those trends where if you're trying to get on the bottom rung of the ladder and no one's climbing up, everyone's stays in place because they didn't want to lose their house and '08, and they have these bad memories of that. It kind of creates a log jam at the bottom. So at the same time, the land availability is a huge story. The property that is suitable for development is becoming rarer and rarer to find. So there's added expense in order to get unsuitable land to become suitable, which is just adding costs to the houses and basically perpetuating a lot of this problem. You can't pour more beans in the top of a funnel and produce more coffee. I thought that was a good way of putting it. But I mean, we say it all the time. Like every project, it has to have a lift station, or there's a power line running through the middle of it, or all this stuff. I mean, the prime properties are priced to perfection to where developers are going, basically you spend more money to buy a perfect piece of property, or you get one at a little bit of a discount, and then you have to put in all this extra infrastructure in order to get it suitable. So basically either way, there's this, where it used to be a little easier, now almost every project seems like there's some sort of heavy lifting component to get it to work. So that also kind of stretches out the timeline of these projects for how long it takes from buying to selling lots, which for developers, they're trying to plan two plus years out. Now that timeline is even stretching further to where they have their money tied up longer in an individual project from when they buy to when they get money coming in. So it takes selling those lots before they can move on to the next project. So basically this delay, well, you don't really see it because there's dirt, drive down any road and there's dump trucks and stuff all over the place. But really, a lot of capital is deployed waiting to get whatever it is on these more difficult tracks ready to market and then sell and move on. So, I mean, they would happily go faster, but it's not as easy as it used to be, and it stretches out the planning cycle.
All the easy stuff's already been developed.
It has, yes. I will say, you can't see it, but the Wall Street Journal said one cause of this was local governments adjusting to remote work, and I'm gonna say Springdale did a good job during COVID. We did not see stuff slowing down a whole lot from us. Our end. Other cities were a little different, but I wanted to say staff did a good job. So this just came out a few days ago, and I thought it was interesting. So for the next 25 years, this Our Housing Future Study says that the region, Northwest Arkansas, will need 2,900 new units of housing built every year. And our historic rate, 2010 to 2016, was 1,400 units a year. So basically, it needs to double in order to meet the demand. So for every year for the next 25 years is what they're saying. And it's basically all of the factors that we talked about before this are all pushing in the same direction. Basically, you know, people want to move out of New York and Chicago and move to more spread out areas like Northwest Arkansas. Northwest Arkansas's economy, people want jobs. These other areas are losing due to COVID or whatever. You know, we're doing better, like we were talking. I mean, we have a lot of things going in our direction, which is a good thing, but then it creates insane pressure because everyone wants to move here, which creates its own problems. So this was kind of an eye-opener for me that kind of how we've been going versus what we're looking at to get where we think we're going to be is going to involve some hard decisions and, you know, really thinking hard about how can we use our land as efficiently as possible, because that kind of pressure is I mean, doubling what we already do. Anyone will already tell you it's nuts right now. So you basically have a choice of you know, build up or build out, or give up and don't build, and you know, people will stop moving here. That's, I mean, the long and the short of it. I wanted to point this out. Every zip code north of Highway 412 is selling at 100% of asking or higher, except for Siloam and Grab right now. So if you think the prices are high now, the trends are pretty much going in one direction. So good to move on. Talking about the affordability piece, Northwest Arkansas, people in Northwest Arkansas, their housing and transportation part of their household budget is a higher percent of their budget than New York or Chicago. That's how much is spent on housing and transportation. So it's already a big chunk of people's budgets, and unfortunately, it doesn't look like it's going to get a lot better without some sort of action. So, one of my favorite questions to ask is, does the future look like the past? If the future does look like the past, you can use the past, you know, and learn from it and tweak it and kind of go forward and go along to get along. But in my opinion, the future looks like it could be a lot different from the past. And maybe what got us here versus where we want to go, we're kind of at an inflection point as a region, in my opinion, to where, you know, the big idea is now's the time. Because those people are going to move here from Seattle or wherever.
Or it starts
they
with
think
things.
these
Yeah,
houses are
because
cheap. They're selling $660,000 houses in San Jose. You know, I mean, our developer clients say any house that goes on, it's Illinois, buyer, all cash, Texas, Florida, whatever. The dynamics of this market are different than what's been seen before. And it needs a response from all of us that is appropriate to make sure that we continue that Northwest Arkansas is a place that people want to live, and Springdale's a place that's not, doesn't have Dallas traffic and, you know, crime and whatever else that is happening in these cities that people are fleeing because they want to move here. So it's just, in my mind, there's a lot of pressure coming, and it's a challenge that we can rise to, no doubt. It just takes people doing the work. So I wanted to point out some housing that's kind of meets some of these trends a little better than maybe what you think of your typical subdivision if you haven't driven around lately. Houses like this, and on the next slide, where it's more dense, there's hardly any yard, those sell like hotcakes. I mean, that is what people want. They don't want the maintenance. They would rather have a smaller lot because it makes the house more affordable, rather than just paying for empty space that all you have to do is mow. So, I mean, I have heard developers say, we thought people wouldn't want to live in houses like this that were this close, and we were wrong. And now they can't build enough of it. So there is some inertia to things changing, but I think that houses like this is a perfect example of, you know, you have a little flexibility, and, you know, if the market responds and people want it, you know, offering that choice is a way to help ease the pressure. So, more on the infrastructure side, basically you picture that same demand is going to demand public services of all kinds. You know, from streets that probably aren't going to look like that in 25 years, they're going to have a lot of vehicles on them. You know, just kind of picturing what does that look like when you have 2,900 homes built every year in Northwest Arkansas. It's a lot of people, and they're going to need roads, water, sewer, police, fire, all the things that people rely on for municipal services. I think that Springdale does a good job from a street perspective of having roads that have access and mobility. Like Don Tyson Parkway, I think, is a huge asset to Springdale. You can get around from east to west if you need to. You know, if we didn't have that and you had to take 412 every time you went from east to west, I mean, that's a huge benefit to quality of life, in my opinion. But it's a road that doesn't have a turnoff, you know, every 500 feet or every 10 feet like Thompson does.
Right.
So there's a mix of roads that get you where you want to go versus roads that you turn off of to go where you're going. And Springdale has done a good job of meeting the challenge of growth up to this point, in my opinion. I wanted to throw an idea out on stormwater retention. Regional detention is more efficient when it can be done, rather than every development having its own little detention pond. It wastes a lot of space, good developable space, to put in a pond, and really it produces a worse outcome than if you had a regional detention facility. So your regional detention, a big pond for 100 acres or whatever, would probably be somewhere near the creek in a low-lying area, because it would be the natural drainage point of the 100 acres. Well, odds are that low spot by the creek is probably not the hot developable property. So rather than taking out good chunks throughout that 100 acres just because of parcel lines that were drawn back in the day, you could be more efficient with the layout and maybe find some opportunities for regional detention. And I think that could help some of these developments because land is scarce and it's getting more expensive, and you want to put it to its best and highest use rather than, you know, if you don't have to use it one way, maybe we can think differently and go a different direction with it. And I would say the same thing with parks and open space. I understand why you want open space and multifamily development, and there's not just massive concrete block buildings stacked up next to each other. But I think like Shaw Park is a perfect example of this, where it's next to a giant park. You know, maybe you have bigger, more useful spaces, kind of like a neighborhood center for parks, where it's like Central Park. It's super dense around it, and then it's a gigantic open park. So I like the Shaw Park model, and then you can turn around and maybe go a little more dense around Shaw Park because you're not going to be hurting for open space, in my opinion, out there. So, just something to keep in mind. Just my opinion, I guess. But.
Can I make a note right there?
Yes.
Because I do think that this is something we should think about doing for, you know, developments that take advantage of parks and trails as well. I say that because I drove down Pleasant across from the high school, and there was a new development that was done over there, and it was probably, I don't know, maybe a fourplex or a sixplex over there. But in order to meet the requirement for the city, they put in a playground, or I don't know what the technical term is for it. I'm sorry, Patsy, but it was basically a square with wood chips and a slide on it, and that was them trying to meet, you know, that was them meeting the requirement for that development, when actually the need right now is that you would put more units on that, because we need more units as opposed to PVC edged playground that nobody is ever going to use and it doesn't look good to begin with, right? So that might be something we can think about, is letting them, you know, if developers are going to build next to trails, connect into trails, connect into parks, that maybe they could get a waiver for some things like that. I mean, it's, you know, I think it's hard to blanket everyone, but I do think that there might be a chance for us to do that.
I guess, in my opinion, to be frank, developers are good at putting a lot of units on a piece of property, you know, efficiently. They're not as good at picking where the playground should go and things like that. It's just not their strength. So, in my opinion, if someone kind of taking this overall city view says, you know, in these quadrants of town or whatever, it'd be nice to have X square feet of open space in each quadrant, or based on population or whatever, you know, just someone kind of looking at it more holistically as a city rather than development specific, because 20 years down the road, it all feels, you know, it's all just Springdale. It's not Park Heights 2 and whatever else. So people, in their mind, they don't think that way. If there's a park, everyone around it can use it.
So you see that as a city responsibility to
I don't
do
see
that?
it as a responsibility, but I think that, I mean, there could be more of a community-led thing, just where there's demand. I don't think it has to be so cookie cutter of, you know, every mile along Don Tyson we put in a park or whatever, but maybe there's areas of town where park services are needed and there's not a park. You know, it may just produce a better outcome.
I don't disagree with you. My only challenge back is that if you don't have that experience, then it needs to be something that is enhanced as far as with your organization to help us as far as better planning some of these things as well.
But multifamily complexes that have no open space are not comfortable. People who live there need some green space in their apartment complex so their kids can go outside for a little while, not have to go down the street to the park. There's gotta be a balance between the two. And if it wants something that they can walk to, you gotta have some of that internal. I mean, I can show you some examples in Springdale where before we had the requirement for open space that are all concrete, and there's no place for kids to play, and it's just not comfortable. There's gotta be a compromise in between to make those two work. And if you're next to a park, maybe like you said, you get some credit for something else, and, you know, Fayetteville takes, you pay so much for open space, and then it's all put together. There's gotta be some kind of balance in there, and I'm not sure we have all the answers, but we do know what the issues are.
No,
Yeah.
I don't think that we need to get rid of open space and
Yeah.
multifamily, but I just think, well,
There's some in between, we need to have some
Yeah.
flexibility.
yeah, you know, having something is better than nothing, but there may be some chances where we can get something even better than
Yeah.
what we've got historically.
But developers shouldn't be able to use every square inch that they've got in a piece of property to put units on too. They've got to contribute to the quality of life and that sense of place. And it's not just to maximize out the number of units or the number of lots that you can get in every subdivision.
I agree.
Okay.
I just.
Yeah, I don't think it's that they're not good at thinking about playgrounds. I think they don't care about playgrounds. I think they care about getting more units on a lot.
I think so too.
And that's where the pushback has got to come from this side, is we're creating a sense of place, not maximizing
Right.
out every developer's dollars, and we got to balance that out because
That-
they
that-
will put as much in there as they can.
That's my challenge back to the development community on there is that, you know, you can't look at the past for the future. I'm just using your same quote that you had. You guys gotta think about that different. I mean, green space is an important part. I agree with Peyton. I mean, if there's a location that's near a trail, it's gonna be a premium property and it's gonna be costing a lot more on that whole piece. So yeah, I mean, those are things that I think about is, does that deserve a waiver in that whole piece? Probably so. But if you have something that there's nothing around at all, and it's really important to establish a green space, that's on you guys to think about that. And it's great that you're good as far as shoving everything that you can in, that you can make as much dollars as you can. But the dynamics need to change. Just like you said, you can't look at the past. You know, Northwest Arkansas was always about land's not an issue. Wow, all of a sudden, 20 years later, it is in that whole piece.
And it can't be just the land that's left over that can be developed, or just the land that's under a power line.
Yeah.
You know, you gotta have some quality that goes with that too. You just said you pick out pieces of property with power lines on them. It can't be the only open space there either. And it can be a token effort to connect it. I can preach them when I'm going. I can do this for a long time.
What tools are available to us as the commission to, along those lines? Because I mean, I think this is what I was kind of saying earlier, as density, and appropriately so, as we pursue density across the city. How do we balance that with quality? You know,
Well-
not to the point it was cost restrictive, but so that it's productive and efficient, but still what is available to us, particularly as a large, you know, a subdivision that they come through.
I think we're gonna have to have some new zoning districts that allows for mixed things. I mean, when you can only do a PUD with 10 acres, we got to vary 7 to 5. That's too restrictive. But not everything can be a PUD down to an acre or a half acre. We got to come up with something in between, and we may come forward with some recommendations for some mixed residential zones or some planned residential zones that allow you to get some of that flexibility in it that we don't have available now. Smaller lot sizes, but with that smaller lot size, we get some amenities that goes with it, or some more open space, and a little bit more flexibility, because a 10-acre PUD is just, it worked 20 years ago. I don't know that it works so much right now.
Well, it just keeps up with the growth of the city,
Yeah.
doing stuff like that, like Bethel Heights had 7 or 8 different
Yeah.
zonings.
Yeah.
And we've got tons more than that.
Yeah.
Now we incorporate them. We're growing, we need more flexibility
Yeah.
for builders.
And in commercial aspects, we need more flexibility there too. We're gonna have to.
Right.
We've been saying this for years. It's not having the time to get there to do it, but there's gotta be some changes. I think you're gonna see some of that come out of all this too.
Let's keep going.
I think also, I think that there's probably some, some unintended consequences that can happen sometimes, right? I mean, I think the carrot works better than the stick with developers. And so that's why I was thinking, that maybe you could give them a waiver or something for trying to connect into existing trails or existing infrastructure like that. But I can tell you as a very, very small developer myself, it's also, we need to think about, just and we've made a lot of improvements here, but the ease of development, right? Because in my world, I don't do $1 million projects at all. I do, but the brain damage that goes into developing a little piece of property, at $100,000 property, it honestly, it's so much time and having to, we've got, there's paperwork and there might be drainage studies, there might be whatever involved. And so, maybe some even, continuing what we've done the last year to streamline the application process and the review process and administrative review instead of a large scale. All that really, really does help, I think, and it encourages people to do all types of projects, little ones and big ones too.
You have to convince the governing body to give up some of that control and let it be done at a different level. Because we still have that aspect that everything ought to go to them for them to look at. We gotta get past that.
Downtown's a
Let's
great
keep going.
example though, even with the strict, or the more strict, design standards.
It's
The
working.
flexibility that the form-based code offers is, it's so much better to plan with than standard zonings.
Moving on. Sorry, we get bogged down on all kinds of things.
I don't have much more. I did just wanted to touch on water and sewer. I understand you're gonna have Springdale water here. But I did want to say the water distribution system in Springdale is poised to meet development's needs. Beaver Water District is installing a massive pump station on the west side of 49 and massive distribution lines to help reinforce all the development on the west side of 49. Springdale is doing a good job on the water side for sure. Sewer is a little bit trickier, especially lately. We do a lot of sewer studies constantly because there are lots of areas of town that do not have sewer capacity. We have multiple like areas where people will call once a week and say, I want to do a project on this property, and we just say, okay, we already know there's no sewer there. Okay, I'll move on. And then we just go through that cycle in different parts of town, commercial, industrial, residential. It's a problem. I don't want to overload the sewer just so that we can build houses. That's not what I'm proposing, but there is probably going to be major investment in the sewer system in Springdale in the coming years. And basically, until that investment comes, there are areas that are limited. I did want to say, in my opinion, some of those areas that may be sewer limited are potential areas for open space that doesn't use sewer. And lastly, I wanted to say, any time that there's an opportunity to, I think that some regionalization is inevitable over the next 25 years with those numbers that we're talking about, and just kind of taking those opportunities to be a good neighbor and things like that, where Springdale can kind of lead the discussion is a good thing, and we like that, where everything kind of works together between cities instead of it feeling like, there's a Great Wall of China between the two. So I just wanted to encourage that, and I know that it's may not be the most fun, and maybe some extra effort, but I do think that those things pay off from a developer side. Because there's a lot of property, that's along the two cities or what have you, and you don't want to touch off World War III, but it's a good property, So having those good relationships can help.
Completely agree.
Thank you very much. We really
Thank you.
appreciate that.
I'm available if you guys ever have questions about what developers are thinking or whatever, other than our monthly get-together. I'm happy to expound on any of this or whatever.
I know we're going long tonight on there, but I mean, these are just really important conversations. I don't know if we have in the future agendas where Ozark Electric and Care Electric potentially need to come in.
Well, we haven't got to that. We've got several topics to deal
Okay.
through, and we haven't got to those things yet.
Well, one of the things that he showed up there as far as 2,900 units a year increase for 25 years. I mean,
Power.
take what happened to Texas
Yeah.
and the lack of the diversification of power. It needs to be considered.
We'll talk about, see if we can get some. But as you see, the 13th is a council meeting night, but what we're proposing is to go ahead and have a work session that night so that we can kind of stay on track with Heath and Philip to be here then, and the 20th would be Vernon from Center of Business and Economic Research at the University, and Dr. Cleveland to talk about schools. And that's all we got scheduled so far out, right? Or do we have more?
Yep, that's what we've gotten thus far.
So we were trying to get the highlights of the topics we talked about on the front end, and we can add as we move forward. We can't keep talking about it over and over. We're gonna actually get in and do something with management too. So, but this is important information to have to put together on what's going on in the region.
Yeah, I was listening in last night, Dr. Cleveland speaking. He'll have some very interesting
Yeah.
information in here.
Yeah.
Especially around, we're obviously the second lowest as far as millage. And they've got some things they're gonna do to continue to maintain that, but it's gonna be very challenging.
And you were listening to the patron show meeting last night, yeah. I heard that today. So that's all we have for tonight. Let us know the topics. We're just gonna keep. Is everybody good with having 2 sessions in April, the 13th and the 20th, and then 2 sessions in May to kind of keep us on track?
Yeah, I would throw out that I know we got into the Zoom world because COVID came about and we had to forsake distancing, but I will tell you, as you go back to work, you're going to see Zoom stay and probably increase. So as we start to get back out into the field and do the things, we will have to have Zoom as an option because we won't be able to make it physically every.
Yeah, well, and we have that option for every meeting. We still leave that available
Okay.
as the Zoom possibility.
You're actually gonna travel again?
Lord, let's hope so. Let's hope so.
All right, well, thank you guys.
Thanks, guys, for coming and speaking to us.
I hope it's for the
Really good
very-
information.
not family
Good job.
life service.
Yeah, me too.